Masechet Moed Katan Daf Chaf Dalid. We start off with a question regarding Avelut on Shabbat. That's what we were also talking about yesterday. Yesh Avelut b'Shabbat or en Avelut b'Shabbat? Do we practice any of the morning customs on Shabbat or no? And his answer is Amarle en Avelut b'Shabbat. Okay, that's Shemuel's opinion. No, we do not practice Avelut on Shabbat. We're going to clarify this more in a minute. But while we're talking about Shemuel, we're going to mention another law of his. So the rabbi, the sages, the students were sitting in front of the Papa, and they said this following halacha in the name of Shemuel. Shemuel is a first generation Amorah. The Papa is a fifth generation. So this is way after Shemuel has passed, but they're remembering a tradition in his name. So here it is. Avel sheshimesh mitato b'me'evlo chayav mita. Someone who is in mourning and he is intimate with his wife while he's in mourning deserves a death penalty. Okay, this is quite extreme, and it can't be that it means it literally that the court would actually give him death penalty. But I guess it's a kind of midah keneged midah. The point is that he is disrespecting the person he should be mourning for by enjoying himself during that period. So he himself is liable to death. Okay, that's how they remembered a tradition in the name of Shemuel. But the Papa corrected them. Amad le Papa asur itmar. No, Shemuel didn't say chayav mita. You were going way too extreme. He just said it's prohibited. That's all. He didn't say anything else like that. And also, you got a second thing wrong. Rabbi Yochanan is the one that said that, not Shemuel. Okay, I guess I think we're saying this here because the question and answer just now was Rabbi Yochanan asking a question to Shemuel. By the way, Rabbi Yochanan was in Eretz Israel. Shemuel was in Bavel. They didn't meet too often, so probably he's asking him maybe by a messenger. And he answered the question. Okay, so we have the story that Papa says you're wrong on two counts of this tradition. So it's good that they recited in front of him so that he can correct them. But then he says, if you're sure that you heard this tradition in the name of Shemuel, it could be, but then we have to correct the subject matter. This is what you must have actually heard. We do have another tradition in the name of Shemuel. It says, Abel shelo para b'shelo perem chayav mita. If a mourner does not let his hair grow, he gets a nice haircut while he's in Shiva or 30, and or who does not tear his garments, that person is chayav mita. So Shemuel did say something about chayav mita regarding mourning, but it wasn't tishmisha mita. It was these other two laws. And this one actually does have a source. Shene'emar la'shechem al tifrau bigdechem lo tifromu v'lo tamutu. When Nadav and Avihu died on the day of the consecration of the Mishkan, so Elazar and Itamar, the remaining two living brothers, were told, even though you're in mourning, you're also Kohanim and you're serving. So you cannot let your hair go loose and you cannot tear your clothes. We learn from that they are an exception. Every other Avel would let his hair grow and tear his clothes. And then this is V'lo Tamut. If you do this, you will not die. So for them, for them, the point is, if they come into the Bet HaMikdash all disheveled, then that's improper to the Bet HaMikdash. So then they have a risk of dying. I mean, going into the Mishkan, you got to be as a high level, serious matter. So therefore, the point is, do this and then you won't die. So we are deriving the opposite, that if a regular Avel refrains from these morning practices, then they are chayav mita. So that makes sense. That's what Shemuel was talking about. Okay, if someone else does not do these morning practices, would be chayav mita. Okay, again, still doesn't mean in a legislative sense that this person's they're not listed in any of the lists of those who are deserving of capital punishment. But the point is that they are liable for not respecting the dead. So the person should get what's coming to them. Okay, Amar Rafram bar Papa Tana be'Evel Rabati, and so now we quote a braita from a book called Evel Rabati. This is a minor tractate. It was not included in the Mishnah, but these are old traditions. It's printed in the back of the Talmud. It's also called sometimes Masechet Semachot, the Masechet about happy things. even though it's about avelut as a euphemism, we call it the tractate of happy events. Okay, so over there we have this work, and it includes lots and lots of laws about avelut. So we're quoting it. Avel asur l'shamesh mitato mime'ev lo. So we have the formulation, the original formulation of Shemuel of Rabbi Yochanan, as Rav Papa corrected it. Right, so this is Rav Ram, the son of Papa, saying this, that one is not allowed to be intimate with his wife during the time of avelut. And someone ignored this halacha, and he was intimate with his wife during the time of avelut, and pigs dragged away his corpse. So there you go. This is in fact something like not exactly chamita, but because he disrespected his relative when he was should have been in mourning. So this person himself, whoever it was, his body was disrespected when he died. Okay. Rashi has another interpretation here that's not PG, so you can look it up on your own later. Amar Shemuel Shemuel said the following, and this is a mnemonic to remember what he said. These three items are chova, and these three items are the shoot. So what is the peh chet zayin? Peh stands for piriat harosh. The chet is chazarat kera lacharav, and the zayin is zikifat hamita chova. His point is when someone is in avel, and then Shabbat comes, he has to stop his avelut, has public avelut, and therefore piriat harosh, he has to uncover his head. We saw usually a mourner would cover their head, wrap their head like in a turban, and so when Shabbat comes, uncover it. That's a sign of mourning. And also the tear in one's shirt when Shabbat comes, he should turn it. He could get a different shirt, but he should, if he's wearing the same shirt, he should turn it to the back so that the tear is not noticeable. And usually they would overturn the bed. On Shabbat, he has to set the bed upright. All these one must do before Shabbat to show there's no public mourning here. However, the next three items are optional. Neilata sandal. If he wants to wear shoes, he may wear shoes on Shabbat. He doesn't have to, because not everybody's wears shoes all the time, right? If you're just at home, whatever, and you don't feel like wearing shoes, you don't have to wear shoes. Tashmish hamita is optional. He may be with his wife on Shabbat during the avelut, but he doesn't have to. And also washing his hands and feet with hot water in the night, Friday night. Also, he may do, but he doesn't have to do, right? And he may not always wash his hands, and therefore the shoot. Okay, sounds like you see from Shemuel that there are no mandatory mourning practices on Shabbat. But Rav disagrees with the first item, and he says if he likes wearing that head covering, then he can leave it on. He doesn't have to take it off. Sometimes people like to wear head coverings all the time. It's not necessarily a sign of mourning. So how come Shemuel doesn't agree with that? After Shemuel said that wearing shoes, you could wear shoes on Shabbat or not wear shoes as a mourner, because not everybody wears shoes. Maybe he doesn't feel like it. Not everybody, not everybody wears shoes all the time. So Shemuel should agree with the logic of Rav and say also, not everybody likes to uncover their head. Some people like to keep their heads covered, and so why not make that an optional item also? And the answer is Shemuel Shemuel kol kera she'eno b'shat chimum eno kera. This halakha is not relevant, but he happens to say this altogether, that anytime someone tears his clothes, not at the time of intense heat, the intense grief, meaning the first day. The time to tear the clothing is the first day. If one tears the clothing afterwards, it's not an official tearing, so that you could mend it, and other laws regarding that. So that's not the official tearing. And he also said, this is relevant, any wrapping of the head that is not the way that the Ishmaelites do it, the way the Arabs do it, and atifa is not called wrapping. You have to do it in this official way. So Machzeh Rav Nachman al Gobe Didikna, and Rav Nachman demonstrated it in the Bet Midrash while they were teaching this, and he showed it's one that would cover the beard, only leaves some of the face open. This guy actually has a long beard, and so you can't see it. So that would be the proper way for a mourner to cover their head. So the point is that according to Shemuel, a mourner covers his head in a particular way that would be identified. I mean, that's the way the Arabs usually do it, but the Jews usually would not wrap their heads this way. And so if someone's doing this, it's evident that they're doing it because they're a mourner. Therefore, one must take this off on Shabbat. Whereas according to Rav, you can cover your head in any way, even in a regular way that people mostly cover their heads most of the time. That's why Rav would say that if you like having your head covered that way, and it's more comfortable, you can keep it on Shabbat. You can take it off or keep it on, whatever you want. But Shmuel says, no, this is a particular mourning type of dress, and therefore one must remove it for Shabbat because there's no mourning on Shabbat. Amar Rabbi Yaakov, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Lo shenu ela she'en lo min alim beraglo, aval im yesh minan beraglo min alav mochichin alav. Rabbi Yochanan says regarding that statement of Shemuel that the only time you have to take off the headdress is if you also have no shoes on. But if you have shoes on, then you can leave it on. The point is that if you're wearing this type of headdress and you're not wearing shoes, someone will look at you on Shabbat and say, "Oh, I guess you're a mourner." And so therefore that's not allowed because there's no public mourning on Shabbat. But if he is wearing shoes, then the person looking, oh, he's wearing shoes, he's not a mourner. And then even if he sees this guy wearing this headdress, he'll say, I guess he likes it. He's just comfortable. He likes the way it looks. And so he will not assume. So you need at least some sign that you're not in mourning on Shabbat. Kol keda. Okay, now that we mentioned that, the Shemuel, that first statement that Shemuel said, that wasn't immediately relevant. So now we're going to analyze it. Kol keda sheno b'shat chimum eno keda. And the official tearing is the one that's done at the time of the greatest grief, meaning on the day of burial. Otherwise, it's not an official tear. Wait a second, we have a question because when they told Shemuel that Rav had died, Rav and Shemuel, they were colleagues, and Shemuel was so grieved about Rav's death that he tore 12 different garments, meaning on different days, right? Every day for the next while, he would keep tearing his garment. And so you see from there that even though it was not on the day of grief, he's still tearing, and that contradicts that. So he says here that only the first day tearing is an official one. Amar azal gavrad hava mistafina mineh. This is the rest of the story. He would tear so many times because he said the person who I feared is now is gone. The point is that Shemuel looked up to Rav. That was his mentor. He feared him. Rav would keep him in check. Shemuel would always say, well, Rav, agree with this. I have to make sure I say the right thing. And so he lost his mentor, and that's why he was so sad. And he kept tearing his clothes for many days. A similar story. Amar le Rabbi Yochanan. Nach nafshed Rabbi Chanina. Rabbi Yochanan was told that Rabbi Chanina had died. That was his mentor. Kera ale telesaris tele. He tore 13 expensive woolen garments. All right, I lost the person, maybe the only person that he was in fear of, that was above him, and so he was very sad for many days. So this is all a question on Shemuel. How come Shemuel said only the first day tearing is significant when both of these sages, Shemuel himself, tore for many days? The answer is Shaneh Rabbanan that one's rabbi is different because you keep thinking about their teachings all the time, right? Every day for the next while, like, oh, I know that Rav had a tradition about that. Oh, Rav, I lost him, and so that the feeling of their loss is fresh every day, even after the first day. So because that feeling of grief is just as intense. It's interesting for the rabbis. Their words, the memory of their teaching was like they were alive. It was that's how they had their continuity. And for the students also, thinking about their teacher's words brought them to life for that moment, and then they felt the grief all over again. And so that's why that those periods of time are in fact like Shat Chimum, like the intense grief. Amar le Ravin bar Adal Rava. Amar Tamidcha Rav Amram Tanya. Avel kol shiva kor'o lefanav. So Rabin Barada said to Rava, it says, your student Rav Amram taught me the following baraita, that a mourner, all 7, he should leave the tear in his shirt in front of him. If he needs to change his shirt, right? Let's say his shirt gets dirty, so he doesn't have to wear the same shirt. He can bring another shirt and tear it again. This happens even today. Someone needs an avel, needs another shirt, so they would tear it again. If it's bishabat kolo lacharav, on Shabbat he could wear the same shirt. He just have to turn it backwards so that the tear is in his back. So it doesn't show. And if on Shabbat he wants to change his clothes, he can change his clothes and does not need to tear it, right? Because it's Shabbat, so he doesn't have to wear torn clothing. And that's what people do today. On Shabbat, they wear regular clothing. Okay, so this is yet another question to Shemuel, because according to this, it says, if one changes his clothes, let's say in the middle of the Shiva, he tears again. So now he's tearing, not on the first day, not on the day of burial, but still called tearing. So how does Shemuel explain this? This only applies to one's father or mother, where again the grief is great and the honor one has to show the father and mother is great, and therefore he has to tear a new garment, even another garment, even if he is in the middle of the week. Whereas for others, he would not need to tear a new garment. Okay, regarding this that you just mentioned, that for a father or mother, we know the halacha is that a shirt that one tears for the loss of a parent, that shirt can never be mended to show that permanent loss. But what about if one tears a second shirt in the middle of the week for his parents because that first shirt got dirty? Does that have the same status as the first one and cannot be mended? Or do you say, no, it was torn later, just as a sign of respect, but not official, so it can be mended? That's the question. And the answer is Piligi ba Avu de Rab Oshaya ubar Kapara. The father of Oshaya and Rab Oshaya and Bar Kapara were colleagues in the transition period between Tanaim and Amoraim. So the father of Oshaya and Bar Kapara, we don't know who said which, but one of them says Chadamar en mitachin v'chadamar mitachin. One says you can mend it, one says that you cannot mend it. We're going to try to figure out who said which. It makes sense that it's the father of Rav Oshaya. He's the one that was stringent and says you can't mend it, because after all, the Amar Rav Oshaya and mitachin, Rav Oshaya himself said you can't mend it. So it makes sense that he got that from his father. So his father must be the one that says no mending. But we reject that. First we say, who did he hear that halakha from? Probably from his father, right? So his father's the one. So not necessarily, even though his father was Rav Oshaya, his teacher was Bar Kapara. So maybe he actually learned it from his teacher against his father. So you know what? Since he had a relationship with both, we can't tell which is which, and so we don't know who said which one. And so, but we do know it's a machloket in that case. All right, next, Amarava. Avel metayel be'un kali betoch beto. So Rava says a mourner on Shabbat may walk in his house with his torn garment. Okay, so even though before we saw those opinions that said there's no mourning at all for on Shabbat, not public and not even private, but Rava says one may mourn in private on Shabbat. That's why he's in his house, so he can wear his torn clothing. Abaye saw Rav Yosef that he put a scarf on his head like a mourner, and he was walking around in his house. So he asked him, don't you agree that you shouldn't be practice mourning rituals on Shabbat? No, said Rabbi Yochanan said, if it's in private, it's permitted. So you see, according to Rabbi Yochanan, there is private mourning on Shabbat. Everyone agrees there's no public mourning on Shabbat. Next, Rabbi Eliezer Mishacharev Bet HaMikdash Aseret Keshabbat. The Mishnah back there had mentioned that for the holidays come, they break a Shiv'ah. And that did apply to Aseret, to Shavuot, according to everyone, during the time of the Bet HaMikdash, because Shavuot, even though it's only one day, nevertheless, one can bring the korbanot of Shavuot for the next 7 days. So, however, Rabbi Eliezer then said that after the Bet HaMikdash is destroyed, and we don't have those korbanot anymore, so now, you know what, Shavuot is really only a one-day holiday. Because it's a one-day holiday, it's treated like Shabbat. And so in Avel, he would not practice public mourning on Shavuot, but Shavuot would not break the Shiva. It's treated like Shabbat, in which he just maybe does private mourning or no mourning and continues counting. And Shavuot is like Shabbat, does not break it. Okay, then the Mishnah also quoted the opinion of, that was Rabbi Eliezer. We quoted the opinion of Rabban Gamliel that said, Rosh Hashanah on Yom Kippur, even though they're only one day holiday, are treated like a holiday. And so Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur can break the Shiv'ah. They have that power, all the holidays too. We saw Chachamim come and say, we disagree with both Rabbi Eliezer and Rabban Gamliel. We say the opposite. We say that Shavuot is like a holiday, and the Chachamim think Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur are like Shabbat. Okay, that in the halacha we say that all the holidays, all Shalosh Regalim and Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, are in fact like festivals, and they break the Shiv'ah. Okay, so let's analyze. Amar Rav Gida, Amar Ben Menashe, Amar Shemuel, halacha keRabban Gamliel. Halacha is like Rabban Gamliel, right? In fact, that's what we just said. That Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur are like festivals, even though they're only one day. Doesn't matter. It's powerful. It breaks the Shiv'ah. The opposite opinion, the opinion that says no, would say only Pesach and Shavuot, since they themselves are 7 days, so the Avel is not going to finish his Shiv'ah. So therefore, he may as well stop now, because right, he's not going to continue to be Avel after the holiday, because the holiday itself is 7 days long. Okay, so the Rabban Gamliel's Kiddush is that the happiness, the joy of these days, even Yom Kippur, it's a serious day, but also a happy day. The joy of these days lifts the spirit of the mourner, and so they're no longer in mourning. This statement that Rav Gidal said in the name of Shemuel, he just says Halakha Rabban Gamliel. What statement of Rabban Gamliel is talking about? Some say it was this one. Some apply his words, Halacha Rabban Gamliel, to a different statement that he said altogether. And it's as follows. Kol shiloshim yom tinok יוסה בחק ונקבר באישה אחת ושתי אנשים, אבל לא באיש אחד ושתי נשים. Okay, the following section of the Gemara is a bit sad. It's talking about infants and children dying, which sadly was much more common back then. Thankfully, is not very common nowadays. There was a tradition in some communities not to study Masechet Moed Katan, because there's all these sad things about Avelut, and people didn't want to have to think about it or talk about it. But these are anyway important halachot to understand. So according to this, all 30 days, if an infant dies within 30 days, you do not have to go and get a coffin for him or her, but rather the infant may be carried by someone and then buried. And when you go to bury, you don't need a minyan, you don't need the whole community to come out for an infant that's under 30 days, but you could have just 3 people come is sufficient. If you do have, let's say, 3 people, it's allowed to be 1 woman and 2 men, but you should make sure it's not 1 man and 2 women, because then there will be a problem of yichud, of seclusion, that maybe the man will go seduce one or the other of the women, and it will lead to promiscuity. They're in the cemetery, it's a kind of secluded place, there's nobody else around. Abba Shaul Omer, says, what are you talking about? There's no problem with that. Even 1 person and 2 women, they just buried an infant. It's probably, one of them is a parent. They're crying. They're in grief. They're not thinking about seducing each other at that point. There's no problem of yichud in such a situation. It's permitted. Okay. Also, we do not practice the other mourning practices. For example, when someone after they buried someone, all the comforters would stand in a line, and the mourners would go down the line, and they would hear words of comfort. We don't do that. After there was only 3 people there. Right, so there's no public there, and we don't do that. We don't say the official Birkat Avelim. This is a beracha that we say during the Birkat Hamazon, special Birkat Hamazon, and we offer words of comfort or other words like Tenachamu min Hashamayim, the normal words of consolation. We don't do that because an infant, even though it's a full life, and someone who would kill that infant is considered murder and all that, yes, but because it was under 30 days, you don't really get to know the child yet, and so therefore, while the parents are certainly sad, it's not as sad as an adult or a child who's older. Okay, next stage. Ben Shiloshim Yoseh Bidlus Kema. Once the infant is 30 days old, you have to remember, but before there was a lot of infant mortality before 30 days, and so even the parents were always like, unsure, is the child going to make it before 30 days? Okay, once 30 days comes, there's a lot better chance that the child will survive. And so if the child dies after 30 days, now it's sadder. And so this child, also a little bit bigger, is taken out in a small coffin. It wouldn't be one that you put on your shoulders to carry, a big one for an adult, but rather a small one that you can carry in your arms. Here's an example of an ancient ossuary. Okay, and so since it's only for an infant. So because the child is more than 30 days old, so now we do practice the regular morning practices, and the comforters will all come to the Hava Minyan, and many people come to the cemetery, stand in a line, and offer words of comfort in the Bekat Hamazon, and people will come and console them with the regular formula. Okay, Ben Shenem Asar Chodesh Yoseh b'mitah. If a child dies who is 1 year old or more, then that person deserves a full coffin. Idea is that the bigger the coffin, the more serious is the mourning, the more sad. And so 1 year old already, the child is developed, and you get to know that, you got to know him or her, and so it's even sadder. Rabbi Akiva Omer, hu ben shana ve'evarav keben shetayim, hu ben shetayim ve'evarav keben shana yoseh b'mitah. Rabbi Akiva disagrees and says if it's only a 1 year old small child, no, that's still considered like before they're 1 years old. If, however, the child is 1 year old but is already grown and is as big as a 2 year old, or if they're actually 2 years old, even if their body is physically small, then they go in a coffin. In other words, according to Rabbi Akiva, being 1 year old is not enough. They have to have some aspect of being two. Two is already much more developed, and so either they're as size of a 2 year old or actually 2 years old, then that person deserves the respect of a full coffin, but not when the child is less than that. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer, Hayoseh b'mitah, Rabim matzivim alav. Anyone, Rabbi Shimon says, see the level of mourning is dependent on the type of coffin. So anyone who's buried with a full coffin, the whole community, the public comes and they do their thing, right? They come over and provide meals, and they come to the cemetery. So it's a full mourning process. And but for those, meaning the small child, who does not who is not buried in a full coffin, but in a small one, then the public does not have to come and do everything, because it was like a little infant at home. No one got to know the child. It wasn't going out yet. So it depends on the type of coffin. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah Omer, Rabbi Elazar has a different criteria, not exactly the coffin, but rather what's the reality on the ground. Nikal rabim mitaskin bo, and on nikal rabim and rabim nitasikin bo. If the child was already known to the public, right? He's already old enough, 2 years old or so. He's walking around. The father's bringing him to shul. The mother's walking with him in the street. Everybody knows this little kid. So once everybody knows him, if he sadly dies, then everybody will say, "Oh, that little kid. Yeah, I remember him. I knew him." Everybody should come and be involved in comforting. However, it was a smaller child, and no one knew. We knew that this family had a baby, but he wasn't out of the house yet. Then public does not have to occupy themselves with the mourning practice. Okay, what about actually delivering a eulogy? Do we have to deliver a eulogy for a child? Right. Well, there's not much to say about a 1 year old. What are you going to say about the person? So who deserves the eulogy? Rabbi Meir b'shem Rabbi Yishmael Omer, aniyim b'nei shalosh, ashirim b'nei chamesh. Okay, this is very interesting. So the eulogy is really not for the deceased; it's for the parents, for the family, and so it's to comfort them. So it's at a stage when the parents will feel especially grieved. Then they need to hear a eulogy. And here, psychologically, there is a difference between poor and rich. Poor, if the child is 3 years old or more, then we eulogize the child. However, for a rich person, no, 3 or 4, they still don't get a eulogy. Only if the child is 5 years old, then they would have a eulogy. Okay, obviously, parents and families, no matter how old the child is, are going to be sad. But the point is that the sadness is of a different level for poor and rich. For poor people, number one, they may be relying on their children for their old age. Their children are going to provide for them, so they feel the hurt especially. The poor may probably are raising the children themselves and spending a lot of money, pinching pennies in order to bring up the child, and so they feel this loss even at young age of 3 more strongly than the rich person who maybe hires a nurse or a governess to take care of the child and has less of a connection to them, and the effort and money that they spent is not as apparent, and maybe they can distract themselves because they have other things going on. So for all those psychological reasons, I mean, I think this was the sad reality of ancient times, and so this halakha reflects that psychological difference. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Mishma Aniyim b'nei chamesh, Ashirim b'nei shesh. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees regarding the difference and says for poor people under 4 years old, it's very sad, but you don't have to have a eulogizer come, only from 5 years old and up. And for rich people, the difference is not 2 years, but only 1 year. So 6 years old, already, I guess by 6 years old, the rich people are interacting with the child much more, and they therefore feel that level of grief that they need someone to come and a professional eulogizer to come and comfort them. And elderly parents are the same as poor people. Now, the elderly parents, maybe they're realizing that they're not going to have any more kids, and this child will take care of them when they are older, so they feel that grief even more. Maybe they're not involved in working or other things, so they're with the small child all the time, and so therefore they are in a similar category to the poor who feel the grief of losing a child at a younger age. Amar Rav Gidel Mar Menashia Amar Rav Halacha Rabbi Yehuda Shamar Mishum Rabbi Ishmael, and the halacha is like this. Second opinion, and they're both the name of Rabbi Ishmael, but Rabbi Yehuda reports 5 and 6 years old, and that is the halacha. Okay, and now back to happier matters. Darash Rabbi Anani Bar Sason Apitcha Debe Nesiya Yom Echad Ifnei Aseret Hare Kan Arba'a Asar. So Rabbi Anani Bar Sason, he went to the entrance of the Nasi's house. The Nasi, a highest level person, someone who can offer a derasha in the entrance of his house, this would be a great honor. And what did he say in his derasha? Is this official public lecture? He says, if someone becomes a mourner one day before Shavuot, and then Shavuot itself comes, that person, it's as if they could already counted 14 days. How do you get that? Well, if a person starts sitting Shiva before the holiday, so we know Shavuot will break the holiday, right? That's what we saw before. That is the halacha. Right, against Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer says Shavuot is like Shabbat. We don't follow that. We say Shavuot is in fact like a holiday. So therefore, the holiday comes and breaks the Shiva. So that one day of Erev Shavuot is counted as 7. And then Shavuot itself, even though it's only a one-day holiday, no, it has the same status as the other ones. Just like Pesach and Shavuot are 7-day holidays, so too Pesach and Sukkot are 7-day holidays. So too Shavuot has within it that potential of 7, because you could have brought korbanot all 7. So even though it's only one day, has the power of 7. So between those 2 days, Erev Shavuot and Shavuot, you already counted 14 days, and that's it. You only have to count 16 days more after that in order to finish the Shiloshim. Shama Rabbi Ameh v'ikpad. Rabbi Ameh heard that, and he was upset that he said that. Not because he disagreed, he agreed, but rather Amar Atudi Dehi. He's taking credit for that? Did he make it up? Did Rabbi Elazar Amar Rabbi Oshaya? That halacha comes from the earlier Amoraim, Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Oshaya. So he should not have said it in his own name. He should have reported it in the name of these earlier Amoraim. Okay, this story is repeated. This happened in Israel. The same story is told about other sages in Bavel. Darash Rabbi Yitzchak Napacha, Yitzchak Napacha actually was from Israel, but I guess he was visiting Bavel one time. He gave a public lecture on the porch of the head of the Jewish community in exile. He's the counterpart of the Nasi, but he's in Babel. So again, a very public lecture, prestigious position, and he says, same law. Someone becomes a mourner even one day before Shavuot, and then Shavuot comes. The Shavuot breaks the 7, that's considered 7. Shavuot itself is like a 7-day holiday, that's 14 days. Shama Rav Sheshat Ikpad. Rav Sheshat, who lives in Babel, heard that. He was upset. Amar Atudi Dehi, to the Bielazad Amar Rabbi Yoshayahi. He didn't say that. Actually, Bielazad and Yoshaya said it. He should have said it in their name. Okay, so we have the same story in 2 different places. Okay, what did those early Amoraim actually say? So we said, how do we know that on Shavuot? Let's say someone wanted to bring their korban chagiga on Shavuot, but they didn't get a chance. Can they make it up 7 days? Yes, they can make it up for the next 6 days, 7 days altogether. Shene'emar, v'chag hamasot u'chag haShavuot, ma chag hamasot yesh tashlumin kol shiva, chag Shavuot yesh tashlumin kol shiva. Since the Pasuk in Devarim compares them and says Pesach is like Shavuot, just like on Chag hamasot, you can make up the offerings of the first day all 7 days. So to Shavuot all 7 days. That's what they said. Okay, that's it. That's all they said. So actually, the Bielazar and Yoshaya did not say anything about Avelut. All they said is that Shavuot has within it 7 days of Tashlumin. So it's these other sages, Rabbi Yitzchak Napacha and Rabbi Anani, that take that lesson and apply it to Avelut and say, oh, the 1 day of Shavuot is counted as 7. So in fact, they did add an innovation to it. But the other rabbis who were listening to hearing them, Rav Sheshat here, right, and Rabbi Ameh in this case, they thought this was so obvious that you don't have to say it, right? You should have still attributed that because just applying their principle to Avelut, whereas I guess they thought, yeah, well, they did say that, but they didn't say anything about Avelut. I'm applying it to Avelut. So anyway, that was the difference of opinion about how they should have presented it. Okay, Papa gave permission to Rav Avya to go give a public lecture, and he said, it is very interesting. If someone becomes a mourner on Erev Rosh Hashanah, so Rosh Hashanah is going to break the Shiva, right? That was the halacha we said. And then Rosh Hashanah also is counted as a 7-day holiday. This is unusual because we understand for Shalosh Regalim, though those are 7-day holidays. Shavuot also is like a 7-day holiday. But his point is Rosh Hashanah, it's a holiday and has the same status as the others. And so yes, that also, Harekan Arba'asa, that's already 14 days. All you have to do is count another 16 days, and the Shiloshim will be over also. Okay, in this case, we don't actually follow this halacha, but it doesn't matter because in any case, Yom Kippur will come, and Yom Kippur breaks the 30. So even without this halacha, one would if someone became a mourner on Erev Rosh Hashanah, between Rosh Hashanah that breaks the Shiva, Yom Kippur breaks the Shiloshim, that's it. The day after Yom Kippur, they're already out of their Shiloshim and they can go take a haircut. So even though we don't follow this halacha, there is the same result. Amar Ravina hilkach yom echad ifnei hachag v'chag u'shmini shelo harei kan 21 yom. Another application: if someone becomes a mourner the day before Sukkot, so that the beginning of Sukkot breaks the Shiv'ah. The holiday of Sukkot itself is 7 days, so those count for the 30, even though Yom Tov does not count for the Shiva, it does count for the 30. So that's 14. And Shemini Aseret is its own holiday. And that own holiday counts as another 7. And so there you go. Between the 8 days of Sukkot and the 1 day before, those 9 days, you actually get 21 days altogether. Person just counts another 9, and that's it. They are out of the mourning period. And last, Ravina Ikla L'Sura Difrat. Amar le Rav Chaviva Mesura Tiflat Ravina. Amar Moed Yom Echad Ifnei Rosh Hashanah Hirei Kan Arba'a Asar. So Ravina went to Surah, the one that's on the Euphrates River, and they asked, and when he got there, the rabbi from there asked Ravina, says, do you agree with this halacha that if someone becomes a mourner 1 day before Rosh Hashanah, that breaks the 7? Rosh Hashanah itself is counted as 7, and that's 14. And his answer is, Ravina says, no, I didn't say anything about that. All I said explicitly was, I agree with Rabban Gamliel. And Rabban Gamliel says that Rosh Hashanah is like any of the Shalosh Regalim. So you can do the calculation yourself, right? And in fact, it's not clear if he's agreeing or not, but he seems to be agreeing and saying, listen, I just said, all I said was Rabban Gamliel. And based on that, you can figure out yourself that since it's like the other Shalosh Regalim, and those other Shalosh Regalim, they break the 7 and they count the 7 themselves. So yeah, it's implicit in the words of Rabban Gamliel himself. Baruch Adonai L'olam, Amen ve'amen.